On. There we go. Good evening. Got us some rain today. That was good. The last little spell we had, I was kind of hoping it would dry up a little bit, but the Lord knows what He's doing. So thankful that we've had the sunshine and the rain. Thankful we can be here tonight. We're going to be in Judges chapter 20 tonight. Next week, Lord willing, we will look at chapter 21 and review and officially finish our study of the book of Judges. And then the day after that is when our group will be going to Panama. So Brother Gene is going to be teaching that next Wednesday night. I know that'll be great. And then the following Wednesday night, we'll go ahead and let you know what our plan is. The My Family books that the elders provided for us, hopefully everybody's got their copy. We're going to go through that together, probably for the rest of this year. And so what we can do is pick one out, and then on Sunday I'll say, hey, let's read this one that comes on this week. That way you can have time to study it at home with your families, and then that Wednesday night we can discuss it. I think that would be really beneficial, and then it would help us and hopefully give us confidence that we can go home and say, hey, I can do this with my family too, and we can do it here together. So looking forward to that. I think there's a lot of great lessons in that, and we've already got the material. So I think it would work out, and looking forward to that. So again, we'll finish Judges this week and next week, Lord willing. Take that next week, and then when we come back, and it'll be August. So it'll be kind of a time to start a new cycle anyway. So I want to go ahead and share that with you. Again, we'll be in Judges 20 tonight. We'll go ahead and go to God in prayer, and then we'll start our study. Father in heaven, we are so very thankful for the rain that you've sent, for the sunshine that we now enjoy. And Father, we recognize that every good and perfect gift comes from you. We're just so grateful, Father, on a daily basis of your love for us. It is so evident as we look throughout creation, as we enjoy our measure of health that we have, and of course as we study your word. We're reminded of your love for us, your care for us, your guidance, and we're just so grateful that we can come here tonight and to study. Father, we're mindful of those who are sick and those who are hurting, especially Sister Marlene. Pray that you will continue to be with her and be with Brother Ed, be with the whole family. I pray that she will get better very soon. They can get back home to us. And Father, again, there's so many who are sick and hurting and having surgery, recovering from surgery. And just pray that you will bless them as only you can. Father, as we study from the book of Judges tonight, help us to learn much from chapter 20 and that we can make application to our lives. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. This is a lengthy chapter. 48 verses in total, and if you like war, you like battles, then this is a chapter that you'll appreciate. A lot of this material is all about the battle and the war, and so I've enjoyed studying it and looking forward to sharing some of it with you. So as we review and kind of recap, let's not forget what has happened. Remember, the end of chapter 19 was a brutal way to end the chapter. This, of course, is when the man had his concubine, and we talked about the fact that the homosexual men gathered around the house. They wanted to know him. He said, I'm not going to do it. So the concubine was offered, and it says they had their way with her till morning, and she died. And the text suggests that she would have died as she was reaching for the door. Another reading of that, of course, is that she was not quite dead yet, but the man took her home, and in that process of traveling, she would have died. Nonetheless, he cut her up into 12 pieces, and he sent her remains throughout the 12 tribes of Israel. Very brutal way to end it, but from our study, we shouldn't be surprised because there's no king in Israel. Every man did that which was right in their own eyes. There was no leadership. There was no guidance. Yes, ma'am?
Why did not the man that owned the house?
Yeah.
After they stayed with the daughter, why? And he said, I'll bring my daughter and
Yeah.
my concubine now.
Right.
But his daughter didn't go.
Yeah, they just took care of the concubine, didn't they? Very similar to Lot's situation. We showed that chart last week about Sodom and Gomorrah in this scene. Very, very similar. But it seemed like they wanted the man, and they said, well, if we can't have the man, we'll just take his concubine. Twisted mindset, that's what it is, really. And it shows just how deep in sin somebody can get. Well, their mind is as if it flips off. They do things that are just horrible. But that's what happens when people don't have a regard for God. So this was a quote that we closed with. I wanted to kind of remind us of it because it gives us this view of what was happening. The Canaanization, of course, we're talking about the nations around them, this godless society around them. The Canaanization of Israel is complete. They have sunk to the level of those nations whom they were commanded to destroy and on whom the judgment of God hung. Remember chapter 1 and chapter 2. Utterly destroy them. They didn't do it. And now this is what happens. We don't do what God says. In the words of Moses, when Israelites act like Canaanites, they may expect the same fate. Of course, Deuteronomy chapter 8, as the nations which the Lord destroys before you, so you shall perish. We mentioned that as Christians, we've got to take note of that. We're in the world, but we must not be of the world. We can't let the world live in us. We've got to be transformed and not conformed. And that's a practical lesson we can learn from this study. So this was all the way up into chapter 19. And that brings us tonight to chapter 20. It's very simple tonight. What we want to do is give an outline of it. I've got a few maps I want to show you and then close with a chart because there are three main battles that take place in this chapter. And so we can look at this material hopefully and glean a lot from it. But notice the title of this is Israel's War with the Benjamites. Now what jumps out to you about that? They're fighting amongst themselves. Exactly. They're fighting amongst themselves. You've got Judah. You've got the divided kingdom that would come, of course. You would have Saul and David and Solomon. Then you've got Rehoboam and Jeroboam. And now you've got God's people divided and fighting. Well, here's Israel and Benjamin, and they're going to be fighting. There's a war that breaks out. Of course, it was brought about by what happened with the concubine and what this man decided to do, sending a message. They got the message loud and clear. So we start off looking through it. We read about the Israelites who assemble. Somebody get 1 through 3 for us, please.
So all the children of Israel came out from Dan to Beersheba, as well as from the land of Gilead, and the congregation gathered together as one man before the Lord at Mizpah. And the leaders of the people, all the tribes of Israel, presented themselves in the assembly of the people of God, 400,000 foot soldiers who drew the sword. Now the children of Benjamin heard that the children of Israel had gone up to Mizpah. Then the children of Israel said, "Tell us, how did this wicked deed happen?"
All right. So again, they caught word. This is a message that you're not going to miss, obviously, and that was the point of what this man did. So they all gathered together, and look at this important number, 400,000 foot soldiers. So that's Israel's army. The tribes are gathering together, and you've got 400,000. Keep that number in mind. That's going to be important. So the Israelites assemble. Now notice at the end of verse 3, they said, okay, what happened? How did this wicked deed happen? So they even understood that what happened was wicked. Not just the fact that this human being, this soul, had been so wrongfully treated and to be desecrated the way she was. They want to know about everything. What's the wickedness? Why did this have to happen? So now we get the Levites' report. If we can read 4 through 7.
So the Levite, the husband of the woman who was murdered, answered and said, "My concubine and I went to Gilead, which belongs to Benjamin, to spend the night. And the men of Gilead rose against me and surrounded the house at night because of me. They intended to kill me, but instead they ravished my concubine so that she died. So I took hold of my concubine, cut her in pieces, and sent her throughout all the territory of the inheritance of Israel, because they committed lewdness and outrage in Israel." 7 also.
Yes, sir. Please.
"Look, all of you are children of Israel. Give your advice and counsel here and now."
All right, thank you. So here's the Levite, who, of course, the Levites were to be the religious go-tos, if you will. He should have been this one that people could look to and confide in. But after this statement, he kind of leaves the scene. He's like, here's what happened, and now you deal with it. So look at what he says, and it's very carefully crafted. The husband of the woman who was murdered. All right, he said, went to Gibeah, which belongs to Benjamin. They, of course, knew that, but he wants to remind them, hey, these are the Benjamites that did this. So keep that thought in mind. Of course, he recounts everything that happened. The men of Gibeah, the Benjamites, rose against me, surrounded the house. They intended to kill me. What detail did he leave out? Exactly. He's trying to say they wanted to kill me, and so they took my concubine instead of me. They left the fact out that he offered her up. He also left out the fact that they wanted to know him carnally. He just left that fact out. He just says they wanted to kill me. But instead, they ravished my concubine so that she died. So he's painting the picture of, they came and took her and she died. Like as if he had nothing to do with the situation. Verse 6, he says, so I took hold of my concubine. He's already pointed to the fact that she was dead. He had nothing to do with this. Cut her in pieces and sent her throughout all the territory of the inheritance of Israel, because they committed lewdness and outrage in Israel. And then he really just drives the nail home. He says, look, all of you are children of Israel. These are your people that did this. So he's putting the ball back in their court. Yes, sir.
Something else in verse 4, it says, I and my concubine to lodge. There's the idea of hospitality that Israelites offered just strangers on the street. Don't stay, come with us. We'll take care of you. And that was another thing that they also violated in doing what they did. That's a great point.
And he wants them to know. You have failed. Your people have failed in this endeavor. That's right. So that's his report. And that's what we read, of course, in chapter 19. So working through this, we find the Israelites' reaction. Let's read verses 8 through 13.
So all the people were led as one man, saying, none of us will go to his tent, nor will he turn back to his house. But now this is the thing which we will do to Gibeah. We will go up against it by lot. We will take 10 men out of every 100 throughout all the tribes of Israel, 100 out of every 1,000, and 1,000 out of every 10,000. Make provision for the people, that when they come to Gibeah and Benjamin, they may repay all the violence that they have done in Israel. So all the men of Israel were gathered against the city, united together as one man. Then the tribes of Israel sent men through all the tribe of Benjamin, saying, what is this wickedness that has occurred among you? Now therefore deliver unto men the perverted men who are in Gibeah, that we may put them to death and remove the evil from Israel. But the children of Benjamin would not listen to the voice of their children, the voice of their brethren, the children of Israel.
Thank you. Notice they would not listen, and the language is so clear, to their brethren, the children of Israel. These are their own people. They won't listen to it. So instead of, let's go against the guilty people that did this, and let's take care of them, instead you're going to have a civil war that breaks out. Instead of going to the problem, and the Israelites, to their credit, said, hey, we need to take care of this evil. A little leaven leavens the whole lump. Let's take care of this and get it out of the camp. Yes, sir. It does. Yes, sir. That's right. Same thought came to mind with 1 Corinthians and 2 Corinthians right there. You can't allow this to stick there. It's going to affect everybody. You're right. That's an Old Testament principle. You've got to get the sin out of the camp, or it will affect the whole camp. Well, here the children of Benjamin would not listen. They're not going to do it. So when you think about this reaction from the Israelites, there's a twofold reaction. The first one is there's immediate action against the city of Gibeah. They didn't say, well, let's wait, let's think about it. It's immediate. And that's what you find in verses 8 through 11. They said, none of us will go to his tent, nor anybody back to his house. This is urgent. We're going to take care of this right now. We will go up against it by lot. Notice they had the numbers. They're strategic in their numbers, how they're going to do it. Notice that they may repay all the vileness that they have done in Israel. So that word vileness is characterizing everything that's taken place, from the lack of hospitality, as Brother Gene pointed out, to the homosexual nature that was brought out, to the fact that they ultimately killed this concubine. the vileness. That's just the word to describe what had happened. And it says that the men of Israel were gathered against the city. Notice this, united together as one man. In our study of Judges, we haven't seen that, have we? We haven't seen this unity. So it takes something as awful as this to bring the people together. I thought about September 11, 2001. Something as awful as that, for that brief moment, brought a lot of people together. You saw people gathering and praying and everything else. Sometimes it takes something of this magnitude to kind of get everybody focused on what they need to be focusing on. That's kind of what's going on right here with the children of Israel. So there was this immediate action to be taken, but then notice the immediate action against the Benjamites, against the tribe of Benjamin. The tribes of Israel sent men throughout the tribe. What is this wickedness that has occurred among you? In other words, give an account for what's happened. Therefore, deliver up the men, the perverted men who are in Gibeah, that we may put them to death and remove the evil from Israel. There's sin in the camp. We need to take care of it. That's the thought process. If you're taking notes and you'd like to jot these down, verse 13, Leviticus 18:22, and Leviticus 20 and verse 13. It's Leviticus 18:22 and 20:13. And that's significant because homosexuality was condemned to be put to death. Somebody was involved in that, they were to be stoned and put to death. So here we see that sin characterized with all these different words: lewdness, perverted men, wickedness. That was to be put to death. That was they were to be put to death for doing that. And then today we have a whole month celebrating it. So it just goes to show when sin is able to run rampant, look at the damage it can do. But those verses there would go there with verse 13. Yes, sir.
Like you said earlier, all this could be averted if they had obeyed at the beginning. Exactly right. And reported His truth in our lives today.
Yes, sir.
Stay away from foolishness like this.
Right. And it doesn't start off like this. It doesn't start off as ugly. All it takes is that one path. Exactly. That's right. He knew. He knew what was going to happen to him. Just like he knew what was going to happen with Solomon. They will take your heart away from God. That's exactly what happened. So God always knows what he's doing and what he's saying. So this is the Israelites' kind of knee-jerk reaction. But I would suggest to you that for once in this study, they're actually doing what's right. They're coming together and they say, hey, we've got to take care of this sin problem. We can't have that. We're God's people. We can't have it. And so now they move to the battle plan, which is 14 through 17. Somebody like to read that for us.
The children of Benjamin gathered themselves together out of the cities unto Gibeah to go out to battle against the children of Israel. And the children of Benjamin were numbered at that time out of the cities 26,000 men that drew sword, beside the inhabitants of Gibeah, which were numbered 700 chosen men. Among all this people there were 700 chosen men left-handed. Everyone could sling stone at a hairbreadth and not miss. But the men of Israel, beside Benjamin, were numbered 400,000 men that drew sword. All these were men of war.
All right, so here we have the numbers. We have the strategy that's going on. Now keep in mind the size of the Israelites, those who could fight. What was that number? 400,000. So how many did the Benjamites have? 26,000. So right off the bat you see, okay, Israelites far outnumber them, but we're going to notice what God does as He intervenes. Here's another side note I thought was pretty neat. Verse 16, among all this people were 700 select men who were left-handed. Everyone could sling a stone at a hair's breadth and not miss. I looked that up because that intrigued me. I kept thinking Randy Johnson, Max Fried, these lefties that can throw 90 miles an hour and not miss. And so one historian said they could throw up to 90 miles an hour and not miss their target. That's awesome. Yeah. No, thank you. You got 700 men with slings and they don't miss. 90 mile an hour rockets coming at you. I couldn't help but think that is pretty awesome to think about. But that's what they brought to the table. And when you think about how wars were fought back then, and you've got this valley, and you could hide. If you could ambush just right, you could do some damage with these that were so talented. Very uniquely skilled and able to throw that. That's going to come into play here in just a moment, but I couldn't help but bring that up. Jackson thought that was cool too. So that is the, yes ma'am. So Ehud was talked about being left-handed with the dagger. It's almost, and this is not right, of course, but they viewed it as a handicap if you were left-handed. They were looking at right-hand dominant. If you were left-handed, then it wouldn't be the same, but it was significant.
If you had that many,
Yeah, right.
that was totally different.
Yes, sir.
Because if you've got a left-handed quarterback, it sort of throws off the defense because
Mhm.
they're so used to
That's right.
being right-handed.
That's right.
The same thing in most any sport.
Mm-hmm.
And is the minority, so to speak.
Right. That's the word, Miss Renee. The minority. Yeah.
It seems to be a disadvantage, but even if
It's an advantage.
it's considered a real advantage,
Mm-hmm.
you have a good left-hander.
That's right.
Well, the same thing is true here. When you've got 700 of those people, even though it's probably about 3% of the total,
Right. If you have them lined up right,
they probably less than 0.5% of the other army.
that's right.
So here you see the huge discrepancy. It gives
Mhm.
them a little bit of an advantage.
It does. That's right. So yeah, that is significant, Mr. That's a great point. Yeah. Nowhere.
The element of surprise.
That's right. They had it, which they're about to put into practice right here. As we think about the battle plan, we have the numbers. We kind of know what's going on. And that brings us to the final section tonight, verses 18 through 48. Obviously, we're not going to read that verse for verse. I put it in the chart form. We're going to work through it together, but we're going to see kind of what happens in the battle. And of course, I wanted to show you, I mentioned to show you this map. I wish I could have gotten a brighter one. But you'll notice right here that you have the Israelite forces, kind of the darker green, starting here in Bethel. Notice the gathering of the Israelites. There's Mizpah. Thank you, brother. That's awesome. That Brother Bradley read about right here. So here they're going to make their way down to Ramah. There's Gibeah that we read about. Here's the Benjamites, and here's all the land that they had. Now notice you have Jebus. Of course, later will be Jerusalem after David goes in. And you've got Judah. So that's going to be significant that the forces would gather from here, and they're going to drive the Benjamites who start here all the way up to the rock of Rimmon, which we're going to read about here in a moment. So that kind of helps us to see all this was done, notice left to the Dead Sea, the Jordan River right there on that side of the Jordan. Here's another one a little bit more spread out. It's kind of hard to follow this one, but if you had that previous map, it helps. Starting here in Bethel, you have the intertribal gathering, so everybody that's associated with Israel is going to gather here. At Mizpah, you have the Israelites that retreat. We're going to read that here in just a moment. They're going to drop them down, but then as they escape, the Israelites are going to be way too strong for them. So at first, it's going to look like the Benjamites have it figured out, but as the Israelites move them farther north, they're going to take control. As we get to the end, you'll notice that 600 men are left. So 26,000 to start, you're left with 600. So with that, we look at this chart together as we kind of work through that. I hope you can see it well. I should have made that bigger, but on the computer it was a little bit easier to see. We'll start by looking at this in verses 18 through 21. Here's the first battle that takes place. It says, the children of Israel arose, went up to the house of God to inquire of God. So now they're actually doing what they're supposed to be doing. They said, which of us shall go up first to battle against the children of Benjamin? And what does the Lord say? Let's let Judah go first. Now, why is that? Well, it could be because of the location. We notice that Judah's there. They could come up. Could be the number. Could be a deeper meaning, too. Out of the tribe of Judah, of course, Jesus would come. God always had Judah in his mind. Scepter will not pass from Judah, Genesis 49:10. Nonetheless, God is involved. And what we've read in the last few chapters, He's been involved, don't get me wrong, but He hasn't been endorsing anything that's going on. He's been very involved, but not intervening. That they're doing this to themselves, right? Now he steps in and He's intervening into what's taking place. So He says, Judah, go first. So that's the answer from God, and then the action is attack and defeat. But not the Israelites attacking and defeating the Benjamites, but the other way around. It says in verse 19, the children of Israel rose in the morning and camped against Gibeah. The men of Israel went out to battle against Benjamin. The men of Israel put themselves in battle array. The children of Benjamin came out of Gibeah, and on that day cut down to the ground 22,000 men of the Israelites. Verse 22 is interesting. It says, the people, that is the men of Israel, encouraged themselves and again formed the battle line at the place where they had put themselves around the first day. You just lost 22,000 men, and they encouraged themselves. It's almost like, okay, we're good. Top of the first, we get to bat. You know, that's kind of the mentality that they have, but maybe it's because of what we find in verse 23. Then the children of Israel went up and wept before the Lord until evening, and they asked counsel of the Lord, saying, shall I again draw near for battle against the children of my brother Benjamin? Instead of taking this loss and putting it on themselves, they went to God. They finally are starting to figure it out. If we want to be successful, we've got to go to God. So that's the second battle, verses 22 through 25. They go to God, shall we go up again? And God says, yes, go up against him. That's verse 23. This time the children of Israel approached the children of Benjamin on the second day. This is not chronologically 1 day, 2 days. It's the second day of war, second day of battle. And Benjamin went out against them from Gibeah on the second day and cut down to the ground 18,000 more of the children of Israel. All these drew the sword. So you take 22,000 and then you take 18,000. They're starting to be successful taking out some of the Israelites. And so we see attack and defeat. And then finally, 26 through 48, they go back to God. Look at verse 26. It says, the children of Israel, all the people went up and came to the house of God and wept. They sat there before the Lord and fasted that day until evening. They offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before the Lord. Children of Israel inquired of the Lord, and the ark of the covenant of God was there in those days. And Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, stood before it in those days. That gives us help with the timeline. And one writer said today, this might have been about 20 years after Joshua died. That's amazing to think about, isn't it? Joshua, as strong as he was, and all the people, we will obey the Lord. We will do what he says. You read the end of Joshua, you get 2 decades later, and all this is happening. It goes to show how fast it can happen. But here we see Phinehas, they're inquiring of God, they're doing it the right way. Shall I yet again go out to battle against the children of my brother Benjamin, or shall I cease? And the Lord said, go up, and here's the point that changes everything. For tomorrow I will deliver them into your hand. Now they can have real confidence. Even though they've been beat up these last 2 battles, God says, I'm going to deliver them. And so as we kind of look at the end of this unfold, verse 29 says, Israel set men in ambush all around Gibeah. The children of Israel went up against the children of Benjamin on the third day of battle, put themselves in battle array against Gibeah as at the other times. Children of Benjamin went out against the people, and they were drawn away from the city. They began to strike down and kill some of the people, as at the other times, in the highways, and in the field about 30 men of Israel. Children of Benjamin said, they are defeated before us as at the first. Yesterday, 4th of July, I had to watch Jaws, obviously, and then I watched The Patriot. Patriot, Mel Gibson, phenomenal, right? There's that scene when General Cornwallis has the British Army, and the British think we've got this over. And Benjamin Martin gets the militia that's in the middle. And here they come, and they think they've got him. As soon as they go over the rock, you have the whole army. That's kind of the scene that's unfolding here. They strategically knew where they were going to be, and so here's the Benjamites with this arrogance. They're falling just like before. We've got them. We've got them right where we want them. The difference is God is with Israel. God is with Israel. The Benjamites think they've got them, but notice this language here in verse 34. It says that 10,000 select men from all Israel came against Gibeah, and the battle was fierce, but the Benjamites did not know that disaster was upon them. God is with Israel. The Lord, verse 35, the Lord defeated Benjamin before Israel. And the children of Israel destroyed that day 25,100 Benjamites. All these drew the sword. Now keep in mind, how many did they have to start with? 26,000. And here you have 25,100. So in this one day, Israel just took their spirits from them, really. Verse 36 says, the children of Benjamin saw that they were defeated. The men of Israel had given ground to the Benjamites. They relied on the men in ambush, whom they set against Gibeah. And here it talks about in verse 38, there was a signal between the men of Israel and the men in ambush. They saw the smoke rise up. They knew it was time to return into battle. And so Benjamin began to strike. They killed about 30 of the men. Surely they are defeated before us, as in the first battle. It's kind of an instant replay of how they got to this number. When the cloud began to rise from the city in a column of smoke, the Benjamites looked behind them. The whole city was going up in smoke to heaven. And notice in verse 41, the men of Benjamin panicked, for they saw that disaster had come upon them. They turned their backs before the men of Israel. The battle overtook them, and whoever came out of the cities were destroyed in their midst. But then in verse 43, the Israelites learned their lesson, Brother Alderman, from back in not utterly destroying them. Now they're not satisfied. Verse 43, they surrounded the Benjamites and chased them and easily trampled them down as far as the front of Gibeah toward the east, and 18,000 men of Benjamin fell. Verse 45, they turned and fled to the wilderness of the rock in Rimmon, and they cut down 5,000 more. So they're not letting them get away. But they are taking this seriously as they go to battle. They pursued them relentlessly and killed 2,000. And then verse 46 gives us that number again. All who fell on Benjamin that day were 25,000 men. When you get to the very end, verse 47 says that 600 men turned and fled toward the wilderness to the rock of Rimmon, and they stayed at the rock of Rimmon for 4 months. Men of Israel turned back against the children of Benjamin, struck them down with the edge of the sword from every city, men and beasts, all who were found. They also set fire to all the cities that they came to. They finally came together as one, went to God as one, did it His way, and look at the result. There's such a great lesson for us today too. The battles that we fight, we might think we've got it planned out, and we've got all the armor we need and all the ammunition we need, but if we don't seek God's wisdom, we don't do it God's way, we will not be successful. So here the Israelites, yes, they had a bigger army. Yes, they should have won this. But what do you think about these first 2 days of battle? What do you think God was doing in this moment? That's it. Seeing if they were going to turn back to Him, if they were going to depend on Him, and with that to humble them. To say, you're going to be successful, but it's not because of you. And I find that important in Israel's history. Going all the way back to Deuteronomy chapter 7. It says, you're a chosen people, but not because you're great in number, not because of your strength, but because I made a promise to Abraham. And because I'm going to keep that promise. And you're going to be the people that are needed to be preserved because my son is going to come to the tribe of Judah one day. It's powerful to think about God's hand in all of this. And as dark as this period has been, here we see a glimmer of light toward the end. We see the hope that God is still the God of Israel. And as they turn to Him, and as they humble themselves, and as they depend on Him, that's when they can truly be right. That's when they can do things successfully. And that's exactly right. That's such a long chapter with the war and the battle, but keep that underlying theme. You depend on God, and you trust in Him, you obey Him, and do it His way, you'll be successful. There's a lot of application, of course, that we can make, but I wanted to put this chart up here. Hopefully that was an easier way to kind of see it than to go through it. But keep that in mind. They go to God, and 3 times He's going to answer them. So sometimes it takes 3 times. Sometimes it takes more than that. But the point is they trusted in Him, and they went to Him, and because of that, they were successful. And that is Judges chapter 20. And next week, we're going to get into the wives that are provided for the Benjamites. Very unique chapter. A little bit shorter chapter. Our goal is to go through that next week and then have a kind of a review of what we've studied. But any questions or comments or thoughts? Anything in Judges chapter 20 tonight? You're exactly right, Miss Martha. And I thought about that a lot yesterday. Andrew Connolly preached a sermon in 1976. Of course, thinking about that the importance of that day, and he preached a sermon entitled "Will God Always Bless America?" And if you've got YouTube at home, I want to encourage you to go listen to that, because the things he talked about in 1976, the parallels today is unbelievable. Really, hit the nail on the head. But you're right, Miss Martha. All the nations that forget God, they'll be sorry for doing that. And it starts with us. And we've got to remember that we're God's people. We're God's chosen nation as the church. Yes, sir. Brother Dawkins.
I think it's interesting, even through this time of Judges. You had the judges basically the leader of the Israelites, for God. But at this time, so much evil around, it was important for somebody to stay the course, even though they didn't have a true leader, to mediate with God. Phineas. Okay? But somebody had to be able to say, hey, let's do it. That's right. And go to God.
And I think that's what's so significant about the phrase that they gathered as one. You're right. It took Phinehas, it took them going to God the way that God said to do, and somebody standing in the gap saying, this has got to stop. This wickedness has got to stop, because it reflects on who they are as God's people. And Brother Gene pointed out earlier with church discipline, it reflects God's people. It reflects the local congregation. And that's something that's got to be attended to. Yes, sir.
So you see the deadness of the national conscience and what it took to shock them out of that, and you see the parallel today that's going on, the pushback that's beginning against the transgender and the transvestite movement. In America today, the school boards are being taken over because people have finally found out what's being taught in the schools. Yeah. And it's a shame that it takes something like that to get people involved. But if that's what it takes, then that's what it takes.
Very similar to what we're studying here. I mean, even going back to Jephthah, depending on what side of that you look at, if he did in fact offer his daughter up, at what point was it going to take for the people of Israel to say, listen, we got to stop? Brother Dawkins says somebody's got to say, this has got to stop here. And you're right, it's what it's going to take today. And I think you said it, Brother Gene, not too long ago. If enough people stand up and say no, that's what it takes.
And we are the salt of light. We are the counter culture in our society today, because and the thing is, brethren, is nobody else can preach the gospel but the Lord's people.
Yeah,
We're the only ones that are holding the truth in an absolute objective sense.
that's right. Yes, sir.
Block said in his commentary that Israel, their greatest foe,
Yes,
found, they were their own greatest enemy.
that's right.
Sometimes the church is our own greatest enemy because we oppose the things that are right.
Mm-hmm. Man, you be looking at my notes, Brother Jack.
You look at today, the church today is just so much of the church is opposing things that are right.
Using all that energy to fight amongst ourselves about things instead of fighting against sin. That is exactly what I'm doing for the invitation tonight. Brother Jack's already a step ahead of me, as always. But yeah, that's the point that was brought out in that final comment, is that Israel was his own biggest foe. They're fighting against themselves. And sometimes we do the same thing, but it took something that drastic to wake God's people up. And that's Judges chapter 20. So if you will be reading chapter 21, looking forward to closing out our study next week. Yes, sir.